Welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast. I'm Matt Prame, Eric Scope with Jared Mack on the show. Welcome to your Monday edition. That's a mailbag. We continue this into the off season. We've got some questions, wide-ranging topics. We've got football recruiting, we've got women's basketball. We've got a lot to get into on this podcast.
Yeah, we're going to start with, I think, where we needed to start, but I'm honestly not thrilled to jump into this discussion. Just full disclaimer, with NIL talk. With a question from @HighFlyingDucks. And these are his words, not mine. Why is the NCAA so bad at everything? More specifically, why wasn't there some kind of salary cap / accountability instituted with the NIL? Without it, why wouldn't a school pay $8 million for the best quarterback? Small investment on a big return. Pay the kids, but damn. #Autzen Audibles. And then he wrote beneath that to clarify. To be clear, I'm not saying he's not worth it or any other top prospect, especially in the context of college football money. I am saying that the system is broken when it becomes an arm race that only the schools with the top money can win. He is, of course, referring to the big story that came out this weekend from The Athletic. I'm going to butcher the last name, guys, but bear with me. Nico Iamaleava, big-time 5-star recruit out of Southern California. Oregon was considered the favorite until a switch over the weekend in the crystal ball when it was, again, reported by The Athletic that there was an $8 million offer on the table from the University of Tennessee to a Southern California quarterback recruit. Steve Wiltfong from 247 Sports, I think, pretty swiftly goes in and makes a crystal ball prediction swap from Oregon to Tennessee. This had the Duck Territory message board all up in arms. I think it probably had most of Oregon Twitter all up in arms. But the reality is this is what the NIL is. I think in practice, this is a little different from what I was, I guess, expecting maybe, but obviously I should have expected this. I love the idea just to start, I'm totally for players being able to benefit off name, image, and likeness. I think that's an awesome thing. I think it's been, honestly, it took too long to get here. I think this is something that's been in the works for a long, long time, and I was really thrilled when this move was made. It is a little jarring, frankly. And again, this is why it's kind of hard to know how to talk about this, to see an $8 million offer made to a prep player. I kind of think we're all understanding of like a Kayvon Thibodeau, a player at a university making money. And of course, if Kayvon would have been, his recruitment took place during the NIL era, he might have had similar offers from other schools, and who knows how that would have impacted things. But I don't know. I think when you saw the story come across, I think it was kind of hard to wrap your brain around the idea of a 17-year-old being offered this sort of money. And obviously the implication that makes, because let's be real here. I mean, I don't fault him at all if he's going to choose a school that offers him $8 million. That's a ton of money, and there's no guarantees of how things are going to play out. I think this consensus, or at least the vocal majority, seems to be on the side that this is a really bad thing and a bad sign for college football. I'm not sure I'm there yet. I want to see how this plays out. I want to give this more time before I make any kind of call this a fatal blow for college football. But this is certainly just a totally different landscape than it was even a year ago.
Look, I'm with you in that if a player's going to get paid, if someone's going to offer me $8 million to go work for their company, I'm going to go work for their company. No offense to you guys. I would miss working with you, but that would be life-changing money for me. I'm sure this is life-changing money for the recruit that the story was about. We should note The Athletic did not release the name. I don't know if this happened while I was flying home from Vegas, so correct me if I'm wrong here. People have connected the dots to who it potentially could be, but we don't, without a doubt, without any kind of certainty, know it's Nico. So
it's like 95% though. It's pretty clear.
Yeah. But nonetheless, it's life-changing money. So like you said, I don't fault that decision playing, that offer playing a huge factor in his decision-making process. But this will even itself out. We're going to see some ludicrous amounts of money get thrown out the next couple of seasons. And then as some people throw money, some businesses throw money at players, and these players don't pan out, it's going to reel back a little bit. I mean, look at this analogy just for a moment. It's not player related from a college standpoint, but someone paid $500,000 for Tom Brady's last touchdown pass in an auction that happened 2 months ago. The play happened 2 months ago, and the day after the person paid him $500,000, Tom Brady came out of retirement. Like, that's gonna happen in college football. Someone's going to pay a huge sum of money to a player for an endorsement deal, and that player is just not going to be good. I'm not saying that's going to be Nico. I mean, he could go on and be a Heisman winner at Tennessee if that's where he ends up playing. But eventually, it's going to course correct. The market will dictate things a little bit early on for the players' side as people overpay. But eventually, a nice medium will present itself.
Yeah, this is all a regression to the means idea. I don't really care that Nico potentially is getting $8 million. It's $8 million over 3 to 4 years. Good for him. This is how college football kind of is. And if you didn't think that this is how college football kind of was before this instance, you're just kind of lying to yourself at this point.
Right.
Just to answer some of the questions on our original question from High Flying Ducks. Why is the NCAA so bad at everything? I wish I could tell you. Why isn't there some kind of accountability or institution like a salary cap? That's really hard to do, is to put a salary cap on anything, because you're right in the sense that this might become a issue of players going to the highest bidder. But oftentimes it's not. And oftentimes people going to the highest bidder works in the professional sports because these are professional players and you know exactly what you're going to get from your professional players. These are collegiate athletes. These are high school athletes, just like what Matt said. This is somebody who might get a deal going into college and it's going to be looked at as a big man on campus. They get to college. They're not as good as everybody says they are. It's just as simple as that. You can go through the years and 5-star recruits. And, this happened last summer too. I also think this is a partial, kind of a news dump by college football to try to get them back on the map, just like everything was yesterday with Tom Brady coming out and the NFL and the MLB and all that stuff. This happened last summer when the NIL first got announced, where Dr. Pepper was suddenly sponsoring DJ Uiagalelei at Clemson, and he had all these other offers. And
he was terrible.
He goes out there and he's not that good anymore. And I don't know how often you guys see DJ Uiagalelei on your television anymore, or any college football players for that matter on your television anymore. This matters right now. This matters to Oregon Duck fans specifically because it's seemingly taking away a player that could be committing to Oregon, which really sucks for Oregon fans. It's really great for Tennessee fans, but for the rest of the country, everybody's going to read that athletic story and go, that's a lot of money for someone who's 17, and then flip the page. They're not going to care. This is going to be a consistent trend in college football. Oregon will do it, meaning potentially buying a player. Oregon State's going to do it. Everybody in the Pac-12 is going to do it. Everybody in the ACC, SEC, Big 10, Big 12 is going to do it at one point. It just so happens that Nico is probably the first guy over the table, no longer under the table, to be bought out of high school. So it's fine. I think everybody just needs to take a step down, relax, deal with the fact that Oregon might lose a 5-star quarterback, which is pretty bad. They still have more options at the quarterback table. There's 5 5-star quarterbacks in this class. They're all within the top 30. Oregon's had 3 of them visit campus. They've had multiple top 100 players along with the 5 stars visit campus. They will be fine. So that's okay. NIL is interesting. It's certainly a little bit too late in the long scheme of things. There were no rules going into it. I'm sure the NCAA at one point will put in some rules to try to get this to be a mainstream. These are the things that you can do. These are the things that you can't do. But until then, there's no rules. It's going to be the Wild West out there, and whoever has the biggest donors has an advantage. And so far in the Pac-12, Oregon has had probably the biggest donors. That's the other side of this.
Yeah.
They're the only school that has been this up to date on NIL stuff. Other than just handing somebody $8 million like seemingly Tennessee has, Oregon has actually been putting the NIL rules like at the top of their list of things and empowering the athletes themselves into getting deals and sponsorships and things like that instead of just handing people money. So I don't know why there's such a big reason to get mad in all of this.
We should note, I don't know if you saw this, Eric, but over the weekend, Sydney Parrish, I mean, like Jared said, the U of O athletes are getting deals. Sydney Parrish had a Instagram deal with Champ Sports over the weekend. Jared's right. Like, deals are getting made left and right for the University of Oregon, and they are doing it in a good way. Players are getting paid good money, and so it'll work itself out. One thing I want to know that Jared brought up is other quarterbacks. I mean, this news came out over the weekend, and Jaden Rashada, a 5-star quarterback from California, who's been on campus at Oregon, he tweeted, "One thing I can promise is it just means more to me. I'm a competitor." And I thought it was interesting that came out, and I also thought it was interesting that Kenny Dillingham retweeted that. Just stuff to read into.
Yeah, and I just want to stick on this for a moment before we jump to the next question, which is not NIL related. As Jared established, Oregon's been pretty forward thinking with Division Street, and I think recently, I think it was Stuart Mandel reported they have basically their own. I don't know what the language is on it. Basically, like a portal behind the scenes where student
it's like
athletes,
a marketplace.
Yeah, marketplace. That's a better. Yeah, there's the better word I was looking for. Where student athletes are able to be contacted by businesses like third parties, independently. And this is the type of thing that makes Oregon an attractive place. And I think what gets lost in this $8 million offer is Oregon is going to be proactive, and Oregon's probably going to win recruiting battles because of this.
Yeah.
They're not going to just lose everything because of this. And I also want to say this $8 million deal is hypothetical a little bit because we also haven't seen Nico accept it. He hasn't committed to Tennessee. He's still a recruitable athlete. He still will continue to be recruitable, even if he quote unquote does accept the deal. And I also have to say, like, Oregon fans are really kind of running for the hills. Like, this is the end of college football. Like, what's going to be the conversation in 2 weeks if Oregon and Phil Knight come out and say, hey, we're actually offering, and this is all completely hypothetical, $9 million, and now Nico is going to go to Oregon. I mean, is that mean?
Right.
Because there hasn't been an opportunity really to rebut, and this has all been kind of reported behind the scenes. So before we completely demonize the NIL, I thought it was kind of jarring to see some of the discussion on the site. I understand the frustration. I understand the reactions to it because it is disappointing because I think a lot of fans got really excited about Nico to Oregon. That was really where things were discussed and seemed like they were headed. Nothing is finalized. This is all still in flux. And again, this NIL stuff, I think, as we've said, I'm in agreement with you too. It'll course correct. It'll work itself out. And Oregon will still continue to be on the front lines of this, being creative, being innovators. So I think, while it might seem in this instance at the moment, in like the 24-hour news cycle, like the NIL is hurting Oregon, I think big picture, it's probably not going to hurt Oregon more than it's going to help them, big picture. So let's keep that in mind and kind of have that perspective going forward as we wade through. It's going to be, again, this is going to have some real ebbs and flows and probably some not so savory moments. I think this weekend is probably the best example of kind of the ebbs of that.
Well, real quick too, when we talk about how this is going to take college football down a road where only a certain amount of schools are going to sign the elite prospects, that's already happening. Every year, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Notre Dame,
A&M.
Oklahoma, Clemson. It's the same schools. When you find your top 15 schools, it's basically 10 of those 15 are the same ones. It's just they're all in different positions. It's already happening. Nothing. So I don't really think anything's drastically going to change.
No, I mean, I don't think it will either. Those are the schools with the deepest football pockets in the country, more likely than not. I mean, schools like Tennessee or Oregon can probably rival them on every once in a while, but year after year after year, those 5, 6, 7 schools are always going to be the ones that are spending the most on recruiting, on the most on their facilities, and all of that. And it's no different when they can spend some of that money on NIL deals as well. And honestly, if you're a kid, why do you not want to go to one of those schools that are always in the college football playoffs or in the national championship or winning rings? That's so what that you get $3 million. You're gonna go 6 and 8. Who kind of cares if you go to Tennessee or something like that? It'll be fine. I think the only issue in this instance is why we're talking about it is this directly affects somebody who was very high on Oregon.
And to the point, yeah, the NCAA is bad at everything, so I won't rebut that. That's probably the only part that I'm like not even going to try to.
They're terrible
to argue. I think it's just like, all right, it's just who knows. Maybe they'll come up with some legislation that'll impress me, but that hasn't happened in like the 33 years I've been alive. So,
well, the answer to that question is it's the leadership at the top.
Sure.
They don't have good leadership, and it's as simple as that. Until new leadership goes into the higher positions in the NCAA, they'll continue to make stupid decisions.
And I'm actually 32 years old. I just realized, so I forgot how old I was on the podcast, which is I turned 33 in 2 weeks, so go me. All right.
Happy birthday.
Oh, thanks. It's a future birthday. All right. Second one from @Tosh Myers. Name the 3 student athletes who will benefit the most from the new coaching staff. #Autzen Audibles. Do we just all want to say our 3 and then we can come around and discuss why? Or I don't know how we want to approach this, but I'll start with my 3. And this is basically based upon what position groups I think are coached by coaches that have a good track record of developing these positions. So I go Justin Flo, working with Dan Lanning in this group. I just think that's going to be a benefit for him, and Flo is somebody who obviously we're really high on. I go Braden Swinson on that outside linebackers group. I think working with Tosh and kind of this system, I think he has a chance to really have a really big year here. And then I also am going with Ty Thompson just to switch it up and do some offense. Kenny Dillingham has a decent track record developing quarterbacks, and I really am encouraged by what he said. That one is probably the one I'm, I guess, least confident in because the track record is not quite as like if you were to go through what Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoy have done at various stops over the last decade or so, you can point to some really impressive, I guess, development. Probably harder to do that with Dillingham's career to this point, but I'm kind of trusting what I'm seeing with my eyes and through a couple of days in practice and what we've heard from Kenny and what Dan has said about Kenny. I'm pretty optimistic about that one. And I'm also picking that because I'm a sucker for the fans liking me. And I know if I pick Ty Thompson for any answer, people are going to pat me on the back. So go me. Go ahead and pat me on the back in the comments, guys, because I'm sure you all like me picking that. Yeah, thank you, Jared. Virtual pat in the back. Go ahead, Matt.
Mm-hmm. I will stick with Justin Flo. I'll also add Noah Sewell into that one. I think he's going to see he's going to be better, and that's kind of scary. I'm going to cheat because I want to go linebackers, and I could go all 3. Swinson would be my third one as an outside edge guy, but I'm just going to put all 3 of those guys into one category. I think another guy that's going to have a really good impact for Oregon will, on the offensive side of the football, will be Dante Thornton and Troy Franklin. So I'll pick 5 guys, three from one position group and 2 from another. I just think I'm going to buy into the fact that Oregon's offense will be better throwing the football, and they'll be more aggressive with throwing the football. I thought it was really interesting that Blair Anguillo had a story from Kyle Casper, a 4-star recruit who was on campus this weekend, and the family felt like they weren't really interested in Oregon at all, but under the old staff, because the head coach had a reputation of running the football, and that this staff is trying to change that. So I'm going to buy into the fact that Oregon's receivers, they're probably their 2 best big play guys, and Thornton and Franklin will have big years as well.
I like the whole linebacker room perspective because that was what I was thinking about doing, because I think all of them under Lanning is going to be just a better overall development curve for the Ducks. But I'll stick to one. I'll just say Noah Sewell. I feel like he does have room to improve. I'd like to go Justin Flo here as well, but I got to see him on the field. I don't know what it is. It's just like a mental roadblock for me. I need to see him on the field. I like the Braden Swinson pick as well. With Lanning, with Tosh Lupoy, with whoever he's working with. This could be a big year for him. And we've heard good things, all 3 of us, about him going into camp. So if he can continue those, good-natured vibes, going in with the staff and his development, that'd be great. And then in the offensive end, I'll go with offense as well. I was going to go Ty Thompson as well. I was going to, get the fans to pat me on my back as well, Eric. This just kind of feels like I think both all three quarterbacks can really improve with the help of Kenny Dillingham. I just think if you look at the big picture perspective, Ty Thompson has the most potential of the group. And if he improves dramatically, that could lead to the better quarterback of the three. I think Bo Nix can improve. I think Jay Butterfield can improve, but I think Ty Thompson is going to, with the new staff, is going to improve the most, seemingly. Just on the whim that if they all improve, Ty has the most potential. So,
Can I throw one name into the group we haven't mentioned, and that's Adrian Jackson at linebacker? Just because I feel like he can take a big jump, and he's playing inside linebacker. He's working with Lanning. I think the athletic tools there, I said this before, somewhat reminiscent of some of the Georgia backers, and I could see him being somebody who's been quote unquote in that he's going to be a breakout player list for me for like 4 years, and I could see that maybe finally coming to fruition a little bit more here. So that's just a name. We talk inside linebackers. His name hadn't come up, and I just think he's somebody who has maybe a chance to really grow a little bit in a system that maybe is more favorable to him.
I was just going to say, do we feel like he's maybe better suited to be an inside linebacker than outside, which he's played his first 3 years at Oregon? I kind of feel that way.
Yeah, and I think some of it's schematic too, in terms of what he's going to be asked to do. The athletic intangibles there are, and I made this comparison when Devin Jackson committed, are similar to Devin Jackson. This is a guy who played a little bit of safety, a little defensive back in high school. He's come in, he's put on some weight. He's incredibly athletic, so fast and athletic. And it's like, I just feel like the previous staffs have had a hard time figuring out where he fits. So I think the move inside is really encouraging, and I don't expect him to win the starting job because I just think Sewell and Flo are going to be so good. But like he and Jeffrey Boss are probably going to have a heck of a battle, depending upon which spot they're both playing, to kind of be that third guy on the field from that group. Like, I think there's so much talent at inside backer. And that's not even including a Jackson LeDuc or a Keith Brown, who else really like.
Yeah, Eric and I talked about that on the last podcast, or the 2 podcasts ago, excuse me. We just really like Adrian Jackson's just general intangibles, just his athleticism and his size inside linebacker. It felt like the old staff knew how good he was athletically and felt like they needed to get him on the field, but always had a starting duo at linebacker in Troy Dye and Isaac Slade and Matuatia.
Right.
And they had to figure out some way. And Adrian Jackson in 2019, he was, pretty darn good off the edge. He was somebody who you could rely on passing downs to get around a tackle, or just make some kind of bull rush into the middle. But in this situation, if his pass defense is good enough, I think that he can be a really valuable member of the defense.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll wrap up the second half of the mailbag. Welcome back to the Autzen Audibles podcast. Matt Prehm, Eric Scoble, Jared Mack, taking your questions on all things Oregon athletics halfway through.
All right. The question from one of our favorites, Duck for Quacks, asks, has there been any interesting or fun things you've noticed about the new assistant coaches at practices? He writes examples: using a new type of drill, use the whole duck lips instead of an actual whistle, or pretending to be a pirate. Hashtag Autzen Audibles. I haven't seen a lot of pirate garb out at practice so far, which
no eye patches.
Yeah, no eye patches, no bandanas. A little disappointing.
No hooks.
Yeah, no hooks. So maybe we'll start seeing that. It's kind of a fun question, and I'll be honest. Like, the first 2 days where we watched, hard to really see a ton of what was said. Drill wise, I think one thing that stood out, and I know we talked about in our practice report, it seemed like more time spent in special teams both days, at least what we watched. I think that's encouraging. Oregon not great on special teams the last couple of years under Mario Cristobal. I'm putting that kind of lightly. Joe Lorick comes from Penn State as a very accomplished special teams coach. Matt Pallage was also a coordinator at Baylor. Both those guys were probably 2 of the, best dozen or 2 special teams coordinators in the country, somewhere in that range. I think Oregon's going to be better there. I think that just kind of the early seeing them kind of work, on that early on, making that a priority stood out. One thing I didn't notice, but I'm going to give credit to Rob Mosley for this in his practice report, is apparently they were and Jared, I don't know if you saw this or noted it, but they were fielding punts and kicks with boxing gloves on.
They were, yeah.
You saw that? I didn't catch that. You were looking more down that side of the field than I was. That's interesting. I mean, that's certainly different. I imagine that will force you to catch the ball, a little more cleanly. You can't really rely on trying to trap it against your chest with boxing gloves, probably more difficult. That kind of thing stood out. I think one thing, not from an assistant coaching perspective, that stood out, and we only saw this on day one, was Dan using the microphone to kind of transition between drills. I thought that was pretty notable. We didn't see, I don't think, any of that or very, very little of that the second practice, but and that really might have just been hey, we're going to make sure we get these transitions down early on in camp. We're not going to be screwing around. We're not going to be a step slow. And he noted that they were better on their transitions from drill to drill from day 1 to 2 during Saturday's post-practice interviews. But those are a couple of things I had written down. Again, I think, and I don't want to discount what we've seen, but we're probably a little bit shorter on a list here. Like Saturday's practice, we were even more limited in where we could stand and watch, so we couldn't really see a lot of the instructing from the individual periods. But I don't know if you guys have other things that really jumped out to you. Those are a couple of things that I saw that were kind of notable.
Well, I'm not supposed to do this, but you brought up a few of the things that I was going to mention: special teams focus, and then the Dan Lanning microphone deal. So I don't got much to add because you brought up two I was going to bring. I just think it's from the Lanning perspective. I just thought it was interesting how he was literally bouncing between position group to position group. It felt like under Taggart, he hung around quarterbacks predominantly, didn't really go to other position groups. With Cristobal, it felt like he was always with the offensive lineman, or when Oregon would go front seven versus offensive line drills, he would not deviate away from the trenches. And I understand, like, hey, you're a coach, you live where you're best suited for, and that was Cristobal's strength as an offensive line coach. But when you're a head coach, you've got to be everywhere. You've got to be able to make sure you have your hands dipped into every part of the program, and it just felt like it wasn't that way. And so, overreaction, no doubt about it. But just from the one practice I saw, Lanning seemed to be everywhere.
Yeah, not a whole lot, just because we all saw the same thing, and there's not a whole lot to see to begin with. Tosh Lupoy, big visor guy, saw that.
Visors are back at Oregon.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I feel like he's going to become a bucket hat kind of fella coming up in the summer. So I'm excited to see that. Adrian Clem, big long sleeve guy, even in the hot. So that'll be something important to add to everybody's recruiting notebook. Yeah, a lot of special teams drills. Love to see that, considering how Oregon wasn't great at special teams last year. So that was cool. I felt that the first couple of practices that we've been able to see have been as physical as possible without actually tackling people. So that was interesting, because it felt like the first few days of a spring camp for the old regime, for Cristobal and company, were really kind of just conditioning more than anything else, just kind of walkthroughs, simple stuff. It feels like the intensity level for Lanning has really, I don't know, been around that 90 to 95% out of 100 so far. So I'm excited to see when they actually get into pads. I don't think we'll see much just based on what we've seen so far, but I still think it'll be really interesting to watch him work, watch him navigate the field. I think, there's not a whole lot. Wilson Love is electric, the new strength and conditioning coach. I've said that before, though. That's all I got.
Okay, I'm silly for bringing this up. Just two things that stood out from I hadn't seen these people in person. Carlos Lachlan is even more muscular. Like that guy is no yoked. It's like I would imagine if he's carrying the football, it's really hard to take him down, hypothetically. And then this is a silly thing, but I made this comment to Jared as we watched them walk through. Junior Adams a little shorter than I had thought. He's not a very tall guy. I don't know. In my head, I thought he was like 6'2", 6'3" kind of guy. Definitely sub 6 feet. So there's a couple of physical takeaways from the coaches on their first time walking around the campus, I guess.
Same with Kenny.
Kenny's a little short too.
Yeah, but a lot of normal-looking people on this staff. I don't know if like with Cristobal's staff, they were like Coach Joe. Like, there are some big guys, and Coach Moorhead was a distinguishable character. Excuse me. And in this staff, this is a bunch of football coaches.
Yeah. Well, so there you go. There's our assistant coaching perspectives, including
You're all welcome.
Some breakdowns on some of the players. So we could talk about one of the coaches has a big limp. We could talk about that. I mean, there's all sorts of goofy things we get into, but I think we'll move on to avoid making more of a fool of ourselves. All right. The last one from @ZBGreen1. We're talking women's basketball here a little bit before we close the show. What's the most likely outcome for the women's basketball team in this tournament? #Autzen Audibles. For those listening, you probably if you're a women's basketball fan, if you're not, I'll tell you. The Ducks were awarded a 5 seed. They'll play their opening game on Saturday at 2:30 p.m. against number 12 Belmont. Kind of a tough draw because Belmont's been in the tournament 6 straight years, and they are also located in Tennessee. So Oregon is a 5 seed, and Belmont is playing, I think, like 2,300 miles closer to their home campus than Oregon. Oregon's going 2,500 miles across the country, and Belmont's like 200 miles from where Knoxville is. So that's not ideal. Oregon under Kelly Graves has been really good, by the way, in NCAA tournament settings. They've never not made the Sweet 16 under Kelly. So that bodes well. I will note that Tennessee's best player, Jordan Horston, missed the last 5 games of the season with a fractured elbow. That's not ideal. She led the team in rebounding and scoring as like a 17-10 player, really, really talented player. I think expected to go pro and be a top 10 draft pick as well. So if Horston can't play, and this is, of course, assuming Oregon beats Belmont, which I don't think is a guarantee, just because Oregon is so up and down, they might have a more favorable draw in the second round against Tennessee, or Tennessee might lose to Buffalo, and who knows what that means. I think it's really, really hard to predict a most likely outcome here, guys, just because nothing really has gone the way I've thought it would for this team this year. Like, they've had the highs, they've had the lows. You could convince me that this team plays, Louisville in Wichita and maybe competes and almost beats Louisville, because Louisville's been, of the number 1 seeds, the least consistent. They've lost 5 games this year. You could also convince me that Belmont beats Oregon in the opening round. So I'll say most likely is they reach the second round and lose in Knoxville. That's not what I would like it to be, because if they go to Wichita, I think I'll be there. It's really hard for me to sit here with a straight face and suggest they're going to make it the Sweet 16, because this team just has had very little consistency. I really think they have the capability to make it out of the opening weekend with their talent, but it's really hard to say the most likely outcome is that when this is a team that's lost 6 of 12 down the stretch.
It's just that year for just Oregon basketball in general, whether it's the women like we're talking about right now or the men that didn't make the tournament. Like you, Eric, like my first reaction was, woof, that stinks. They have to go to Knoxville all that way, and they have to play a 12-seeded team who's got history in the tournament and is just an hour and a half, 2 hours away from Knoxville. I would expect Belmont to bring a big crowd. Oregon's a big name, an opportunity to get to the second round and to play another in-state school. Yeah. The Belmont student section could make their way over there. But it also wouldn't surprise me if, this team comes out and Tahina Paopao plays really good and Sabally and Prince are a good dynamic duo. And Maddie Shears had a couple weeks to kind of rest up that ankle. And it wouldn't surprise me if they go out and they win that game by 20. They're capable of doing that. I think the expectation for me is win one game, get to the tournament, win a game. And if you get to the second week of the tournament and you make it to the Sweet 16, I think this year is a roaring success. All the injuries that you've had, if you win a game and then you lose to Tennessee in the second round, I think you probably feel a little underwhelmed about the season. But when you factor in the injuries, you factor in everything that goes with a regular season and it's happened, you probably, after a week or so, feel that, hey, it was a good year. But if you lose to Belmont in the first round, you're probably going to have a poor taste for how this season ended.
Yeah, I think anybody losing in the first round would definitely leave a poor taste in their mouth, unless you were, like a 16 seed going against a 1. That's not Oregon's case. This is a 12-5 matchup. These are some of the favorites for people to predict as upsets in terms of their bracketology and bracket predictions. I don't think I would predict Oregon to lose in round 1. I think if Tennessee does win over Buffalo, that would be a very favorable draw for Oregon, like Eric mentioned earlier. I can see a Sweet 16 run, but I can also see them getting knocked out in the first round. So that's kind of where we're at. That's been, if you've listened to our podcasts about the Pac-12 tournament as well, I feel like this was the consensus among the group as well. It's like, well, they could get to the championship game, or they could lose in the second round. Who knows? So that's kind of where I'm at with this again. I do see a path to the Sweet 16 very easily. This again, if Oregon is operating on all cylinders or firing on all cylinders, however you want to describe it, they're good enough to where they can really give Louisville a run for their money. And they could potentially win that game and get to the Elite Eight just like that. And it could be that easy. However, it has not been that easy all season, as Matt just outlined a few moments ago. So for Oregon, I mean, a Sweet 16 run, I feel like, is the most logical or most probable, I would say. But there's still a chance, man. It's tough to just predict it and be like, yes, they are Sweet 16, lock it in. Pick of the week. It's just not that.
Yep, agreed. I'm splitting the difference between a Sweet 16 and a opening round loss and just saying they win a game, and that's the most likely. But I'm hoping that I'll be booking travel to Wichita on like Monday afternoon. But I have no real confidence that takes place, just because it's hard to project with this team. But Tennessee, as we said, pretty favorable that you could be playing a team that went 2-3 down its stretch without its best player, and that best player has a fractured elbow. Coach is sick there. By the way, Kelly Harper, their coach, is saying it's day to day. She says, but it's not out of the question she plays, but it's also not a given either. So if Horston's playing, she's probably not close to 100% either. So but if they get to that game, I think that's not totally out of the realm of possibility that they can pull a small upset there. I will also say that kind of stinks when you're a 5 seed and you have to go play all the way across the country against 2 teams that are basically in their hometown. And that's just a really tough draw. ESPN had Oregon as one of the big losers from the seeding, because they also noted, Michelle Vopel, I will give credit to her, that Oregon was probably 1 win away against a Utah or a Colorado or a Stanford, certainly, of being on that 4 line. And now we're talking about them hosting, and maybe Tennessee or someone else is coming out west. But them's the breaks in women's college basketball. And it's a system that, it favors you if you can be a top 16 team a lot. And it really stinks if you're maybe team 17 or 18 like Oregon was this year.
We'll have more in-depth look at the women here on a podcast later this week. We'll also discuss the men's NIT bid, where they go, how long they survive in that, which could be 1 game. And then we'll also discuss some more recruiting later on this week on the podcast as well. So plenty to look forward to with the Autzen Audibles podcast. Also, make sure to check out duckterritory.com for more coverage of spring football. We've got women's basketball tournament coverage. We've got the NIT coverage. We've got recruiting coverage. We've got Jared's baseball coverage. You will get a lot of stuff on duckterritory.com. So until the next episode of the Autzen Audibles podcast, thanks for listening.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.